Positioned at the forefront of perhaps the most significant shift in Western history, having both predicted its cause and consequences while offering grandiose revolutionary ideas as potential solutions, Friedrich Nietzsche stands as one of the most influential thinkers of modern times. The crossroads where Nietzsche stands marks the moment when the primary path of Western religious faith began to crumble, leaving behind a vast emptiness in the face of life's suffering, with what appeared to be only one alternative path, towards pessimism and nihilism. His life's work became the examination of this new problem and an attempt to forge a third path, away from both religious faith and nihilism, toward new meaning and human values. Nietzsche was born in 1844 in Saxony, Prussia, now Eastern Germany, into a modest family where he had a typical, sheltered childhood. His father, Karl Ludwig Nietzsche, was the town's Lutheran pastor, which immediately immersed young Nietzsche in Christian faith. However, this faith would soon be tested. His father, the very man who preached about God, was diagnosed with an incurable brain disease. For a year he suffered terribly before dying at just 35 years old. The following year, Nietzsche's younger brother Ludwig also died. This rupture between religious foundations and early confrontation with inexplicable pain and suffering endured by good, innocent people likely laid the groundwork for his future philosophical works. After a rather gloomy, serious, and lonely childhood, Nietzsche went on to study theology at the University of Bonn. Both in school and university, he demonstrated exceptional intellectual abilities, particularly excelling in Christian theology. However, after just one semester, as his critical thinking sharpened and he encountered various critiques of Christianity, Nietzsche was compelled to abandon his faith, completely shed in his naivety and blind devotion. He then turned to philology, the study of language history, at the University of Leipzig. His achievements were so remarkable that by his mid-20s, he became a professor of classical philology at the University of Basel, the youngest professor ever appointed there, a record that stands to this day. After just a few years of teaching, Nietzsche resigned, partly due to growing dissatisfaction with academic constraints, and partly due to deteriorating health caused by hereditary illnesses and what is believed to have been syphilis contracted at a brothel. From this point, he lived a largely solitary life, traveling through Europe, moving between climates suitable for his poor health, and surviving on a modest university pension. He spent most of his remaining lucid years in the Swiss Alps. During this period, between bouts of illness, a failed romantic affair, deteriorating friendships and family relations, and depressive and nihilistic states, Nietzsche devoted most of his time to walking, thinking, and writing, finding solace and meaning in philosophy. It was during this time that he produced his most influential works: Human, All Too Human, The Gay Science, Thus Spoke Zarathustra, Beyond Good and Evil, and On the Genealogy of Morals. In these works, Nietzsche laid the foundations for a new philosophy, one that essentially loosened the bolts on all contemporary certainties, all concepts of good and evil, all notions of true and false, right and wrong. God is dead. God remains dead, and we have killed him. How shall we comfort ourselves, the murderers of all murderers? What was holiest and mightiest of all that the world has yet owned has bled to death under our knives. Is not the greatness of this deed too great for us? Must we ourselves not become gods simply to appear worthy of it? This is perhaps one of Nietzsche's most famous and significant passages. In the words, "God is dead," we see not celebration of lost faith, but his urgent warning about its consequences. The collapse of Christian faith meant, in Nietzsche's view, the collapse of everything built upon it, all European morality, its justifications and values. He predicted and feared that without adequate replacement, humanity would be left in a void without clear systems or meaning, descending into nihilistic despair. One of Nietzsche's key ideas in addressing this problem was recognizing that no universal, objective truth exists. There are no facts, only interpretations, he wrote. Nietzsche denied the very possibility of absolute truth, believing all attempts to find it were misguided and only distanced modern man from discovering meaning. The pursuit of universal objectivity or meaning beyond this life drains significance from present, earthly human existence, which is inherently subjective, independent, and expressive. Thus Nietzsche turned primarily to arts and humanities, believing creative works, music, philosophy, literature, theater, etc., could convey deeper truths and fill the void left by lost higher meaning. However, examining this theory, he found that arts and humanities could become hollowed out, academic or commercialized, losing their power. He then developed a philosophy liberating the individual from dependence on collective experience and cultural mechanisms, focusing instead on personal creative expression and subjective greatness, placing meaning-making in each person's hands. This philosophy was embodied in what Nietzsche called the Übermensch, Overman or Superman, first introduced in Thus Spoke Zarathustra. The Overman is a confident, independent individual who vigorously pursues desires and unapologetically upholds beliefs. One who deviates from the collective, exhibits strategic selfishness, and acts with aggression and grandeur. Nietzsche justified such traits by arguing that a new morality opposing Christian values, which praised weakness and modesty, better suited natural human experience requiring strength, power, and greatness. While this concept faces valid criticisms and misinterpretations, perhaps more important than the Overman image is what it represents. Broadly, Nietzsche presents the Overman as an idealized version of oneself, an image of a perfect, powerful being who has overcome all fears and deficiencies, serving as a goal to strive toward. As an ideal, it's unattainable, which is precisely the point. Nietzsche argued that the world, including humans, operates through what he called the will to power, an insatiable drive in all living things to manifest power. The world is the will to power, and nothing besides, he wrote. For Nietzsche, this will manifests in personal growth, and is satisfied through its pursuit. Importantly, power here means not physical strength or dominance over others, but self-mastery. Psychological and spiritual strength through self-control and continuous growth represent ultimate harmony with the will to power, and thus with life itself. Striving toward the Overman ideal fuels this self-improvement process through cycles of dissatisfaction, growth, and self-rediscovery. Nietzsche called this process self-overcoming and considered it key to solving life's meaning and value problem. By setting growth goals affirming what one considers an ideal life, suffering transforms into something worthwhile, a spiritual alchemy affirming life despite inevitable pain. If we have our own why in life, we shall get along with almost any how. Nietzsche wrote. Unlike his predecessor Arthur Schopenhauer, who believed suffering should be minimized, Nietzsche argued suffering is good, fuel for gaining strength. Life is inevitable suffering. The question isn't whether but for what. The meaninglessness of suffering, not suffering itself, was the curse that lay over mankind, he wrote. Continuing to write while living increasingly isolated in the mountains, Nietzsche showed worsening mental health. At 44, seeing a horse beaten in the street, he suffered a breakdown, rushing to embrace it while crying, "I understand you." His last lucid moment displaying pity and compassion, seemingly contradicting his philosophy. Soon after, Nietzsche descended into complete madness, then catatonia. One of modernity's greatest minds appeared crushed by its own weight. Whether from organic brain damage, syphilis, or a mind that journeyed too far inward, remains unknown. Never recovering, Nietzsche died of a stroke in 1900 at 55. By his own standards, Nietzsche was likely considered a failure during his lifetime. Before losing sanity, he achieved little recognition. His books didn't sell. He earned no respect. But after death, his works soared to global prominence, sometimes in horrifying distortions, like Nazi misinterpretations. Yet today Nietzsche's works remain relevant, important, and woven into modern thought. His quotes, aphorisms, and ideas resonate daily in culture, literally and symbolically. Ironically fitting his philosophy, Nietzsche's life and death became a kind of self-overcoming, sacrifice for something greater. Of course, his ideas face valid criticisms, including concepts of self-overcoming, sacrifice, and greatness. While his analysis of modern problems remains accurate, his solutions don't suit all. Is suffering for an unattainable ideal truly good? How can one see it as good if they don't initially? How create a life-affirming interpretation if life seems meaningless? If one rejects the premise that suffering for progress is good, the whole philosophy may seem misguided. Nietzsche's non-linear, sometimes contradictory works allow multiple interpretations. More importantly, as his philosophy encourages openness, it doesn't dictate how to think, but teaches thinking for oneself.